What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. So, some big news dropped on the bowling front today. Apparently, the USBC has seen fit to get behind the whole string pin setter situation, which I honestly don't understand why that is, and it kind of surprises me. I'd like to just share my thoughts on that, but I've got the article pulled up here. I'm going to read through the article to begin with. Arlington, Texas. The United States Bowling Congress released a new research report on string pin setters, and the USBC Equipment Specifications Committee has approved final specifications based on the research. The USBC will certify string pin setters and string pin bowling as an independent category of equipment and competition effective beginning August 1st of 2023. The final specifications reduce the string length to a minimum of 54 inches. I think this is bad for multiple reasons. Coming from the area that I come from, Montana has a lot of, I guess you could call them mom and pop bowling centers. Smaller bowling centers, usually privately owned instead of corporate owned. And these bowling centers were built a long time ago. They're very aging, very old. And they keep them up and running as best they can. They host tournaments whenever they can. They host leagues as much as possible. And of course, they also cater to open bowlers. Now, when you travel elsewhere to a bigger state, Utah and other places, that's when you start to see like boleros start to pop up all over the place. But the reason I think this is bad for the bowling industry is because those small bowling centers, those mom and pop owned, privately owned bowling centers, are already struggling. The reason they struggle is because of their age. A lot of these places built back in the 80s, the 70s, some in the 90s, some before that, to be honest with you. I've bowled in some that were built a really long time ago. What this means is that the machines in use inside the bowling center are also very, very old. The problem is the owners are doing everything they can to keep these centers up and running. Finding parts for these machines is getting harder and harder and harder as time goes on. The owner of Town and Country, I'm very good friends with, and I've talked to him a lot about the type of maintenance that he does at his place to keep things running. And honestly, he has to do a lot of things to keep the machines running efficiently because he can't find parts, jerry-rigging essentially to keep things running. And honestly, he's got one of the better running centers around the area. What I'm afraid of with this whole string pin setter situation is a lot of these mom and pop shops, since they are having trouble keeping their machines running already and finding parts for them, they might decide to just drop the amount of money it would cost to replace I guess they're calling them free fall pin setters now, but I'm afraid that they're going to replace those old pin setters with these string pin setters to reduce their overall cost of running. Because let's just face it, the cost of running a bowling center is quite high. I've talked to enough bowling center owners in the past to know that for sure. The other part of this is put yourself in the shoes of a bowling center operator. Let's say you want to open a bowling alley. Doesn't matter really where, but you really want to open a bowling center and operate a bowling center. What do you think is going to be cheaper for you to do? Open let's just say a 12-lane house, because 12-lane houses are usually what I run into in my area. That's where I bowl, is at a 12-lane center. But let's say you wanted to open a 12-lane center. What do you think the cost it would be per lane, or per pair, let's just say, to open a bowling center that's 12 lanes with free fall pin setters versus a bowling center with 12 lanes that has string pin setters? I can tell you that the cost difference is going to be astronomically huge. So here's what you get now, right? You get these centers that are owned and still operating, built a long time ago, probably going to consider switching over to string pin setters purely because it's cheaper to operate. It'll keep them in business longer. Then you also, on top of that, have bowling centers that are going to come out, or you're going to have these people who are going to want to open brand new bowling centers opting to go the string pin setter route instead of the free fall pin setter route because it's cheaper to do, right? Well, what does that mean for tournament bowling and competitive bowling as time goes on, as more bowling centers close? Throughout COVID in 2020, we saw an astronomically large number of bowling centers close down because they could not afford to stay in operation. And as far as, corporate owned bowling centers, Bull Arrow has taken over a very large number of bowling centers throughout the United States, primarily because, they're backing the PBA. They, that whole purchase happened a couple years ago where Bull Arrow purchased the PBA. And so they're taking over a lot of bowling centers. And, you know, I've heard professionals talk about this, and I've heard other people talk about this. I've talked to some of my friends about this in the bowling industry, where some bull arrows are great. They run efficiently and very effectively, and they really, care about their customers. But then you've got some other bull arrows that are not focused at all on their league bowlers or their tournament bowling scene. They're more focused on the open bowling scene. And I've seen it in my travels, bowling regionals and bowling at different tournaments. And, specifically in Utah and Idaho and in Oregon, Washington State, in those areas, I've seen bull arrows and I've gone into bull arrows where the focus is primarily open bowling. They've got arcade centers in there. They've got, a really big, I call them snack bar, but really it's a restaurant inside the bowling alley. I mean, heck, I've been in one that had laser tag inside of it, and they're focused on the open bowling scene and getting most of their revenue from open bowling. What does that mean as far as like the lane maintenance and all that stuff? It's pretty poor. So I can definitely see a corporation like Bull Arrow taking several of their centers throughout the United States and transferring them from these free fall pin setters to string pin setters, which means there's going to be fewer and fewer and fewer locations out there that are going to be able to provide a competitive bowling scene, whether it's league format or tournament format. As you read through this article, I'm going to read a little bit farther here. So here's another section. Under those final specifications, key findings of this 2023 report include: the USBC lab data indicates strike percentage on string pin bowling will be 7.1% less, not more, less than when using free fall pin setters. Now, I imagine because the string is on the pin, it messes with the physics and everything when the ball impacts the pins, and it messes with sending messengers, so it makes it harder to carry strikes. Another part, this could result, I like their wordage here, could result in average differences as large as 10 pins or more. I would reword that if I were them, and I would say this will result in differences. Because even if you take a professional bowler, let's just say Jason Belmonte, and you put him on a string pin machine versus a free fall pin machine, you're not going to get those head pin messengers going from one end of the lane to the other to take out like a 10 pin. That just isn't going to happen. You're not going to have pins bouncing off the sidewalls and going across the deck. You're not going to have that excitement of watching that ball impact those set of pins with so much energy and force that it just shreds the rack and sends pins flying. It's going to make things just totally different. And so I can definitely imagine even a player the caliber of Jason Belmonte is going to have a reduction in average. League average, if he bowls leagues, and tournament average. Here's another part of the article. Unusual spare conversion rates have been nearly eliminated. So I think what they're saying there, unusual spare conversion rates. So I think what they're trying to say is it's harder to leave like splits, for example, like, 7-10, 4-9, a lot of those odd splits, 2-10, washouts and things like that. It's harder to leave those things because the strings are attached to the pins, and it's not going to take much movement of that particular pin to get it to just topple over as opposed to stand up when it should be. So in a case where you throw a shot, right, and you tug it a little bit and it should have been a pocket 4-9, well, now instead of being a pocket 4-9, it's probably going to be just a 10 pin or maybe even a 4 pin. Or in a case where you throw the shot and it should have left you a 7-10, maybe the 7 falls or the 10 falls out. A lot of those scenarios are going to happen a lot less. And, another part of that whole split conversion situation is, let's say miraculously you leave a pocket 4-9 or, a 2-10 or some weird split combination like that. The ability to pick that up when there's a string attached to the pin, in my opinion, is just non-existent. The pin or the string is going to limit how far that pin can be moved over to pick up an astronomical split like that. Something like a 2-10, something that you've seen professionals pick up a lot more often now because they're getting better at picking up splits. I highly doubt you're going to be able to slide that 2-pin far enough over to reach the 10-pin. The string just will not be long enough to reach. So keep that in mind as well. Another part of the article. Additional testing is needed to determine if a conversion between string pin setter competition and free fall pin competition is reasonable. Which, I mean, honestly, the start of the article, it talks all about how this is going to be an independent category of equipment and competition effective August 1st. So the thing is, there shouldn't be any, in my opinion, conversion back and forth. There's different forms of bowling out there. You've got 10-pin bowling, you've got duck pin bowling, you've got candlestick bowling. There's different types of bowling, but there's no crossover between them. Like, you can't take your average from a legal, or should I say certified, 10-pin free fall bowling center with free fall machines and convert that if you were to go try to compete for candle pin or duck pin bowling. It does not exist. So I have no idea what their reasoning behind trying to come up with a conversion system is for keeping your average back and forth. It should be its own independent thing. And the fact that they're trying to push that, I think, is dangerous. I think in the long run, they want to see most bowling centers convert to string pin setters, which I think is a horrible idea. And to be honest, if that was to happen, I would quit bowling. I love bowling. I honestly love bowling to death. I love everything about it. I love the competitive scene. I love the coaching aspect of it. I love trying to give the next generation something that they can use to better themselves in the future. But I'm sorry, string pin setters, USBC, that just isn't it. I'm sorry. And I can't ever see that making its way to the professional scene, or at least I hope not. So anyway, guys, I hope I'm wrong about this. Honestly, I hope these small centers, these privately owned centers around areas like my state and the smaller states stay in business with their free fall machines. I hope they keep finding ways to keep those machines running, because a lot of those places, they can't afford to put new free fall setters in. They just aren't making enough money. So they have to do everything they can to keep their old machines running. I hope they find a way to keep doing that. I hope they don't switch over to string setters. And as far as boleros around the country, really honestly, I hope that the management of Bolero sees the benefit in keeping as many of those centers as possible running with the free fall pin setters. Anyway, guys, thanks for watching the video today. Leave a comment below about your opinion on the free fall pin setter situation versus the string pin setter situation. What are your thoughts? What do you think is going to happen as the time goes on? Please leave a like on the video, and I will see you guys next time.